Question 1. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current product development cycle at NXP Semiconductors is experiencing delays, impacting time to market. To address this, a team is proposing several process optimization strategies. Which of the following strategies best balances the need for efficiency with the imperative of regulatory compliance and ethical operation? Option A. Introduce a system where individual teams can independently modify their development processes to increase speed, without a centralized coordination or assessment of how these changes affect overall company compliance or inter-team dependencies. Option B. Expedite the implementation of a new project management software across all teams, assuming it will automatically streamline workflows and reduce delays, with compliance checks to be performed retrospectively. Option C. Implement a phased approach to process optimization, starting with a comprehensive audit of the existing workflow, followed by data-driven identification of bottlenecks and rigorous testing of proposed solutions for compliance with NXP's internal policies and relevant industry regulations before full-scale deployment. Option D. Focus solely on reducing the number of review stages in the development process to speed up approvals, without a detailed analysis of the impact on quality control or regulatory sign-offs. Correct answer is C. Implement a phased approach to process optimization, starting with a comprehensive audit of the existing workflow, followed by data-driven identification of bottlenecks and rigorous testing of proposed solutions for compliance with NXP's internal policies and relevant industry regulations before full-scale deployment. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing efficiency gains with the potential for unintended consequences that could impact regulatory compliance and stakeholder trust. NXP Semiconductors, as a global technology company, operates within a complex web of regulations, and any process optimization must consider these constraints. Careful judgment is required to ensure that improvements do not inadvertently lead to breaches of data privacy, security protocols, or fair labor practices, all of which are critical for maintaining NXP's reputation and legal standing. The correct approach involves a thorough, data-driven analysis of the existing process, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies, and then proposing solutions that are rigorously tested for compliance and impact. This method ensures that any changes are not only effective in improving efficiency, but also adhere to all relevant NXP policies and external regulations. This aligns with principles of responsible innovation and operational excellence, which are paramount in the semiconductor industry. An approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness and compliance checks is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the implementation of flawed processes that violate data protection laws, compromise product quality, or create an unfair working environment. Such failures can result in significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer confidence. Another incorrect approach is to implement changes based solely on anecdotal evidence or without consulting all relevant departments. This can lead to overlooking critical dependencies, failing to address the root causes of inefficiencies, and alienating key stakeholders whose buy-in is essential for successful implementation. It also risks creating new problems that are harder to resolve than the original ones. A third incorrect approach is to focus exclusively on cost reduction without considering the impact on quality, employee well-being, or regulatory adherence. While cost efficiency is important, it should not come at the expense of ethical conduct or legal compliance. This can lead to a decline in product reliability, increased employee turnover, and potential legal repercussions. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that includes understanding the problem from multiple perspectives, gathering comprehensive data, evaluating potential solutions against defined criteria, including efficiency, cost, risk, and compliance, consulting with relevant experts and stakeholders, piloting changes, and continuously monitoring outcomes. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with organizational values and regulatory requirements. Question 2. Research into process optimization at NXP Semiconductors has identified potential improvements in data handling workflows, which approach best balances efficiency gains with strict adherence to regulatory frameworks and ethical considerations. Option A. Prioritize the adoption of the fastest and most cost-effective new technologies for data handling, with minimal disruption to existing operations. Option B. Focus on streamlining data transfer protocols to expedite information flow, without detailed scrutiny of the underlying data governance policies. Option C. Implement changes that significantly reduce data processing time, assuming current data handling practices are compliant. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of proposed optimizations against all applicable data privacy, intellectual property, and industry-specific regulations, involving legal and compliance teams, before implementation. The correct answer is C. Implement changes that significantly reduce data processing time, assuming current data handling practices are compliant. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because NXP Semiconductors, as a global technology company, operates within a complex web of international regulations and ethical standards. Process optimization, while beneficial for efficiency and cost reduction, must be implemented in a manner that strictly adheres to these frameworks. The challenge lies in balancing the drive for improvement with the imperative of compliance and ethical conduct, particularly when dealing with sensitive data or intellectual property. Careful judgment is required to ensure that optimization efforts do not inadvertently lead to regulatory breaches or ethical compromises. The correct approach involves a thorough review of existing processes against the relevant regulatory framework for NXP Semiconductors operations, which would include data privacy laws, e.g., GDPR if operating in the EU or equivalent local regulations, intellectual property protection laws, and any industry-specific compliance requirements. This approach prioritizes understanding the legal and ethical landscape before proposing changes. By identifying potential risks and ensuring proposed optimizations align with or enhance compliance, NXP can achieve its goals responsibly. This is ethically sound as it upholds the company's commitment to lawful operations and data protection, and regulatorily justified by the need to avoid penalties, reputational damage, and loss of trust. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering regulatory implications would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to violations of data privacy laws, for instance, by inadequately securing sensitive customer or employee information during a process change, resulting in significant fines and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thorough risk assessment would also be flawed. This might involve adopting new technologies or workflows without verifying their compliance with intellectual property laws, potentially leading to infringement claims and costly litigation. Furthermore, an approach that bypasses internal legal and compliance departments when evaluating process changes would be ethically and regulatorily unsound, as it undermines established governance structures designed to ensure adherence to laws and ethical standards. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the applicable regulatory and ethical landscape. This involves proactive engagement with legal and compliance teams, conducting thorough risk assessments for any proposed process changes, and prioritizing solutions that demonstrably uphold compliance and ethical principles. When evaluating optimization strategies, professionals should ask, does this change comply with all relevant laws and regulations? Does it uphold our ethical commitments? What are the potential risks, and how can they be mitigated? This systematic approach ensures that efficiency gains are achieved without compromising integrity or legal standing. Question 3. Quality control measures reveal a recurring minor defect in a specific semiconductor component manufactured by NXP Semiconductors. To address this, a proposal suggests streamlining the testing phase by reducing the number of validation checks, arguing this will significantly decrease production time and associated costs. Option A. Immediately implement the streamlined testing phase to achieve cost savings and faster production, assuming the defect rate is statistically insignificant. Option B. Implement the streamlined testing phase but increase post-production sampling to catch any potential issues without conducting a prior validation study. Option C. Implement the proposed streamlined testing phase after a thorough risk assessment and validation study to ensure no compromise to product quality or regulatory compliance. Option D. Reject the proposal outright due to the potential for increased defects and focus on identifying the root cause of the defect through a more in-depth, albeit time-consuming, analysis. The correct answer is C. Implement the proposed streamlined testing phase after a thorough risk assessment and validation study to ensure no compromise to product quality or regulatory compliance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because NXP Semiconductors, as a global entity, must navigate varying regulatory landscapes while maintaining consistent product quality and ethical standards. Challenge lies in identifying and implementing process optimizations that not only enhance efficiency, but also strictly adhere to the specific regulatory framework governing NXP's operations in the relevant jurisdiction for this assessment, which is assumed to be the United States for the purpose of this question. A deep understanding of U.S. semiconductor manufacturing regulations, quality management standards, and ethical business practices is paramount. The correct approach involves a systematic review of existing processes, identifying bottlenecks or areas for improvement, and proposing changes that demonstrably enhance efficiency and quality without compromising regulatory compliance or product integrity. This aligns with principles of continuous improvement mandated by quality management systems, e.g., ISO 9001, which is often a baseline expectation even if not explicitly stated as the sole governing framework, and ethical business conduct, ensuring that NXP operates responsibly and transparently. Specifically, within the U.S. context, this would involve considering regulations related to product safety, environmental impact, and fair labor practices, as well as industry-specific standards for semiconductor manufacturing. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction, without a thorough impact assessment on quality or regulatory adherence, would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to noncompliance with U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA regulations, if the semiconductors are used in medical devices, or Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, regulations if manufacturing processes have environmental implications. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over validation of the optimized process risks introducing defects or noncompliance, potentially violating Federal Trade Commission, FTC, guidelines on product claims or specific industry standards. Furthermore, an approach that bypasses established internal quality assurance protocols, even if seemingly efficient, undermines the company's commitment to robust quality management and could lead to significant reputational damage and legal repercussions. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the objectives, followed by a comprehensive assessment of potential solutions against all relevant constraints, including regulatory requirements, ethical considerations, and business goals. This involves risk assessment, stakeholder consultation, and a phased implementation with rigorous testing and validation. Question 4. Comparative studies suggest that process optimization initiatives can significantly enhance operational efficiency. When considering a new automated data handling system for NXP Semiconductors that promises substantial cost reductions, what is the most professionally responsible approach to ensure compliance and ethical conduct? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review involving legal, compliance, and operational teams to assess the system's impact on data privacy, intellectual property protection, and adherence to all relevant NXP policies and external regulations before deployment. Option B. Implement the new system immediately to realize cost savings, with a plan to address any compliance issues that may arise post-implementation. Option C. Prioritize the cost savings and efficiency gains, assuming that any potential compliance risks are minor and manageable through future adjustments. Option D. Rely on the vendor's assurances that the system is compliant with all relevant regulations, and proceed with implementation based on their claims. Correct answer is B. Implement the new system immediately to realize cost savings, with a plan to address any compliance issues that may arise post-implementation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because NXP Semiconductors, as a global technology company, operates within a complex web of international regulations and ethical standards. Process optimization, while beneficial for efficiency and cost reduction, must be implemented in a manner that upholds these standards, particularly concerning data privacy and intellectual property. The core challenge lies in balancing the drive for operational improvement with the imperative to comply with all applicable laws and ethical guidelines, ensuring that no shortcuts are taken that could lead to regulatory breaches or reputational damage. The correct approach involves a thorough, multidisciplinary review that prioritizes compliance and ethical considerations alongside efficiency gains. This means engaging legal, compliance, and relevant operational teams to assess the proposed process changes against NXP's internal policies and external regulatory frameworks. The justification for this approach lies in its proactive identification and mitigation of risks. By systematically evaluating how process changes might impact data handling, intellectual property protection, and supply chain integrity, NXP can ensure that optimizations do not inadvertently lead to violations of regulations such as GDPR, if applicable to the data involved, or other data protection laws, nor compromise its commitment to ethical business practices. This aligns with the principle of compliance by design. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost savings without a comprehensive compliance review is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to regulatory fines, legal challenges, and significant reputational harm. For instance, implementing a new data processing workflow that inadvertently exposes sensitive customer or proprietary information would violate data protection laws and NXP's ethical obligations. Another incorrect approach might involve outsourcing a process to a vendor without adequate due diligence regarding their own compliance standards, potentially leading to supply chain risks and violations of labor or environmental regulations. Such actions demonstrate a failure to exercise due diligence and a disregard for the legal and ethical responsibilities inherent in process optimization. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should mandate that any proposed process optimization undergoes a rigorous evaluation by relevant stakeholders, including legal and compliance departments, before implementation. The assessment should identify potential regulatory, ethical, and operational risks and propose mitigation strategies. Prioritizing compliance and ethical considerations ensures that NXP maintains its integrity and avoids costly repercussions, fostering sustainable growth and trust with its stakeholders. Question 5. Quality control measures reveal a recurring delay in the final testing phase for a critical component at NXP Semiconductors. To address this, which of the following approaches would be most aligned with demonstrating a commitment to process optimization within the context of a hiring assessment focused on regulatory compliance and efficient operations? Option A. Immediately implement a new, untested testing methodology observed in a competitor's public demonstration, assuming it will be faster. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive root cause analysis using historical testing data and process flow mapping to identify specific bottlenecks and propose data-driven solutions. Option C. Introduce a simplified testing checklist based on general industry best practices, bypassing detailed validation steps to expedite the process. Option D. Rely on the subjective feedback from senior engineers who have extensive experience, without collecting objective performance metrics. Correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive root cause analysis using historical testing data and process flow mapping to identify specific bottlenecks and propose data-driven solutions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because NXP Semiconductors, as a global entity, must navigate the complexities of process optimization while adhering to a singular, specified regulatory framework for this assessment. The core difficulty lies in identifying the most effective and compliant approach to improving efficiency without compromising product integrity or violating the assessment's jurisdictional constraints. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that aligns with the assessment's specific regulatory environment, which for this exam is assumed to be the NXP Semiconductors Hiring Assessment Test's internal guidelines, and any explicitly stated or implied regulatory context within that test. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven review of existing processes, focusing on identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies through objective metrics. This method is professionally sound because it prioritizes evidence-based decision-making, a cornerstone of good practice in any regulated industry. By analyzing current performance against established benchmarks and identifying areas for improvement, NXP can implement targeted changes that are likely to yield tangible benefits. This aligns with the implicit requirement of any hiring assessment to demonstrate a structured and analytical problem-solving capability, which is further reinforced by the need to operate within the defined assessment parameters. The ethical justification lies in pursuing operational excellence responsibly, ensuring that improvements do not inadvertently lead to compliance breaches or product defects. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid implementation without thorough analysis risks introducing unforeseen issues. This could lead to non-compliance with internal NXP standards or any external regulations that might be implicitly referenced by the assessment's context, even if not explicitly stated. For instance, a hasty change might bypass necessary validation steps, potentially impacting product quality and safety, which would be a significant ethical and professional failing. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few individuals, rather than objective data, is professionally unsound. This method is prone to bias and may not reflect the true state of the process, leading to ineffective or even detrimental changes. Ethically, it fails to uphold the principle of due diligence and responsible management. A third incorrect approach that involves adopting a process from a different industry or company without rigorous adaptation and validation is also problematic. While external best practices can be valuable, a direct, uncritical transfer can overlook critical differences in operational context, regulatory environments, or product-specific requirements. This can result in inefficiencies, increased risks, and potential non-compliance, demonstrating a lack of critical thinking and due diligence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Clearly defining the problem and the desired outcome. 2. Gathering objective data and metrics related to the current process. 3. Analyzing the data to identify root causes of inefficiencies or issues. 4. Evaluating potential solutions based on their feasibility, impact, and compliance with relevant regulations and internal policies. 5. Implementing the chosen solution with a robust monitoring and feedback mechanism. 6. Continuously reviewing and refining the process based on performance data. Question 6. Regulatory review indicates that NXP Semiconductors is exploring new automated workflows for internal data management to improve operational efficiency. Which of the following approaches best balances process optimization with regulatory compliance within the specified jurisdiction? Option A. Prioritize the speed of implementation for the automated workflows, assuming that existing compliance measures will automatically adapt to the new processes. Option B. Implement the new automated workflows immediately to capture efficiency gains, with a plan to address any compliance issues that arise post-implementation. Option C. Focus on optimizing the technical aspects of the automated workflows, deferring any detailed regulatory assessment until after the system has been in use for a significant period. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the proposed automated workflows against all relevant data protection, privacy, and operational regulations, seeking formal approval from legal and compliance departments before deployment. The correct answer is B. Implement the new automated workflows immediately to capture efficiency gains, with a plan to address any compliance issues that arise post-implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for NXP Semiconductors employees by requiring them to balance the pursuit of process optimization with strict adherence to regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing improvements that enhance efficiency without inadvertently creating new compliance risks or violating existing regulations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed optimization does not compromise data integrity, privacy, or security, which are paramount in the semiconductor industry and subject to stringent regulatory oversight. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented review of proposed process changes against all applicable regulations and internal compliance policies before implementation. This ensures that optimization efforts are aligned with legal and ethical standards, mitigating potential risks. Specifically, this approach prioritizes understanding the regulatory landscape governing data handling, product lifecycle management, and operational procedures within NXP's jurisdiction. By proactively identifying potential conflicts and seeking necessary approvals, employees demonstrate a commitment to responsible innovation and operational excellence, thereby safeguarding the company from legal repercussions and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed of implementation without adequate regulatory vetting risks significant compliance failures. For instance, bypassing established change control procedures or failing to consult with legal and compliance departments before deploying a new process could lead to violations of data protection laws, intellectual property regulations, or industry-specific standards. Another incorrect approach might involve implementing optimizations that, while seemingly efficient, inadvertently create loopholes in security protocols, exposing sensitive company or customer data to unauthorized access, which is a direct contravention of data security mandates. A third incorrect approach could be to assume that existing regulations are static and do not require reevaluation in light of new processes, leading to outdated compliance measures that are no longer effective. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory environment. When considering process optimization, the first step should be to identify all relevant regulations and internal policies. This should be followed by a risk assessment, evaluating how the proposed optimization might impact compliance. Consultation with legal, compliance, and relevant subject matter experts is crucial. Documentation of the entire process, including the rationale for decisions and any approvals obtained, is essential for accountability and future reference. This systematic approach ensures that efficiency gains are achieved responsibly and sustainably. Question 7. Consider a scenario where NXP Semiconductors is looking to streamline its semiconductor manufacturing process to reduce lead times and operational costs. A proposal is put forward to bypass certain quality control checks and to use a less regulated but cheaper chemical solvent in a critical cleaning stage. This proposal is presented as a quick win for efficiency. What is the most appropriate approach for NXP Semiconductors to take in evaluating this proposal? Option A. Prioritize the cost savings and speed of implementation, and only investigate regulatory compliance if a formal complaint or penalty is received from a regulatory body. Option B. Implement the changes for a trial period in a limited production run, and only seek regulatory approval if significant issues arise during the trial. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the proposed changes, assessing their impact against NXP Semiconductors' internal compliance policies and all relevant national and international regulations pertaining to manufacturing, environmental impact, and product safety before any implementation. Option D. Immediately implement the proposed changes to capitalize on the perceived efficiency gains, assuming that any minor regulatory issues can be addressed later. The correct answer is D. Immediately implement the proposed changes to capitalize on the perceived efficiency gains, assuming that any minor regulatory issues can be addressed later. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficiency with long-term compliance and ethical considerations. NXP Semiconductors, as a global technology company, operates under a complex web of regulations that govern its manufacturing processes, supply chain, and product development. A hasty optimization that overlooks these requirements can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that process improvements are not only effective, but also sustainable and compliant. The correct approach involves a thorough review of existing processes against relevant NXP Semiconductors' internal policies and applicable regulatory frameworks, such as those governing environmental impact, data privacy, and product safety. This systematic evaluation ensures that any proposed changes are vetted for compliance before implementation. By prioritizing a compliance-first mindset, NXP Semiconductors can achieve process optimization without compromising its legal obligations or ethical standards. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining trust with stakeholders and ensuring the long-term viability of its operations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed and cost reduction without considering regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to violations of environmental regulations, such as improper waste disposal or emissions control, resulting in fines and operational shutdowns. Similarly, overlooking data privacy regulations during process changes could expose sensitive customer or proprietary information, leading to severe legal repercussions and loss of competitive advantage. Another flawed approach might involve bypassing established quality control procedures in the name of efficiency, which could compromise product integrity and lead to recalls or safety issues, directly contravening product safety standards and consumer protection laws. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that integrates regulatory compliance and ethical considerations into every stage of process optimization. This involves 1. Understanding the regulatory landscape relevant to the specific process being optimized. 2. conducting a comprehensive risk assessment that includes potential compliance failures. 3. Engaging legal and compliance teams early in the planning phase. 4. Implementing changes incrementally with thorough testing and validation against regulatory requirements. 5. Establishing ongoing monitoring mechanisms to ensure sustained compliance. Question 8. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of process delays in the NXP semiconductor supply chain due to manual data entry points. Which of the following approaches best addresses this identified risk while adhering to best practices for process optimization? Option A. Rely on the experience of senior team members to manually streamline existing data entry procedures, avoiding the cost of new technology. Option B. Focus on increasing the speed of manual data entry through additional training, without altering the existing process flow. Option C. Immediately implement an automated data capture system without further analysis, assuming it will resolve the delays. Option D. Conduct a detailed process mapping exercise to identify specific bottlenecks, gather input from affected teams, and propose phased, data-driven automation solutions. The correct answer is C. Immediately implement an automated data capture system without further analysis, assuming it will resolve the delays. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with adherence to NXP Semiconductors' internal policies and potentially relevant industry best practices for process optimization, all within the context of a simulated hiring assessment. The pressure to demonstrate problem-solving skills without compromising established procedures or ethical considerations is a key difficulty. Careful judgment is required to identify the most effective and compliant path forward. The correct approach involves a systematic review of existing processes, identifying bottlenecks through data analysis and stakeholder feedback, and then proposing incremental, data-driven improvements. This aligns with principles of continuous improvement and responsible process management. Regulatory and ethical justification stems from the need for transparency, accountability, and evidence-based decision-making, which are fundamental to good corporate governance and operational integrity. Implementing changes without proper validation or consideration of broader impacts could lead to unintended consequences, increased risk, and non-compliance with internal NXP Semiconductors guidelines for process change. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid implementation, without thorough analysis, risks introducing new inefficiencies or overlooking critical dependencies. This would be ethically questionable, as it prioritizes speed over quality and potentially impacts the integrity of NXP Semiconductors operations. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established review channels or seeking external validation without internal consensus could lead to a lack of buy-in and potential non-compliance with NXP Semiconductors' internal change management protocols. This demonstrates a disregard for established procedures and collaborative decision-making. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal opinion rather than objective data fails to meet the standards of professional rigor expected in process optimization, potentially leading to suboptimal outcomes, and a failure to address the root causes of inefficiencies. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the current state, identifying root causes through objective analysis, evaluating potential solutions against defined criteria, including efficiency, cost, risk, and compliance, and implementing changes in a controlled, iterative manner with continuous monitoring and feedback. This structured approach ensures that process optimization efforts are effective, sustainable, and aligned with organizational objectives and ethical standards. Question 9. The investigation demonstrates that a recently implemented process optimization at NXP Semiconductors, aimed at streamlining data entry for product testing, has inadvertently introduced a subtle but consistent alteration in the recorded test parameters. While the optimization has reduced processing time, the quality assurance (QA) team has raised concerns about the potential impact on the integrity of the data used for regulatory submissions and internal quality control. Given this situation, what is the most appropriate course of action for NXP Semiconductors? Option A. Proceed with the optimized process, assuming the alterations are minor and unlikely to affect regulatory compliance, and focus on further efficiency improvements. Option B. Implement the optimized process and rely on external auditors to flag any data integrity issues during their next review, at which point corrective actions will be considered. Option C. Continue with the optimized process to maintain efficiency gains, and instruct the data analysis team to manually correct any discrepancies identified during the next regulatory submission cycle. Option D. Immediately halt the optimized process, revert to the previous method, and initiate a comprehensive review by the QA team to identify the root cause of the data alteration and develop a compliant, optimized solution. The correct answer is D. Immediately halt the optimized process, revert to the previous method, and initiate a comprehensive review by the QA team to identify the root cause of the data alteration and develop a compliant, optimized solution. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for NXP Semiconductors by requiring a decision on how to address a process optimization initiative that has unintended consequences impacting data integrity and regulatory compliance. The core difficulty lies in balancing the drive for efficiency with the absolute necessity of adhering to data handling regulations and maintaining the trustworthiness of information used in product development and reporting. Careful judgment is required to ensure that process improvements do not inadvertently create compliance risks or compromise the quality of data that NXP relies upon. The correct approach involves a thorough review and validation of the optimized process by the Quality Assurance (QA) team, specifically focusing on its impact on data integrity and adherence to relevant NXP internal policies and any applicable external regulations. This is the best professional practice because it directly addresses the potential risks identified. By involving QA, NXP ensures that any changes are scrutinized for their compliance implications and that data remains accurate and reliable. This aligns with ethical principles of due diligence and professional responsibility, and it supports regulatory requirements that mandate accurate record-keeping and data management. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings without adequate validation would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the potential downstream impacts on data integrity and compliance. Such an approach risks violating regulations that govern data accuracy and security, potentially leading to fines, reputational damage, and compromised product quality. Another incorrect approach, which involves implementing the optimization and addressing data discrepancies only if they are flagged by external auditors, represents a reactive and negligent stance. This is ethically unsound, as it places the burden of identifying critical flaws on external parties rather than proactively ensuring compliance. It also fails to uphold the professional duty to maintain high standards of data management and operational integrity. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on the speed of implementation and assuming the optimization is inherently correct, demonstrates a lack of critical thinking and due diligence. This overlooks the fundamental principle that process changes, especially those impacting data, must be rigorously tested and validated to ensure they meet all functional, ethical, and regulatory requirements. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. Before implementing any process optimization, NXP should 1. Identify potential impacts on data integrity, security, and regulatory compliance. 2. Engage relevant stakeholders, including QA and legal/compliance departments, to review proposed changes. 3. Conduct thorough testing and validation to confirm that the optimized process meets all requirements. 4. Establish clear metrics for monitoring the performance and compliance of the new process post-implementation. Question 10. The analysis reveals that NXP Semiconductors is considering a significant overhaul of its internal supply chain management software to improve efficiency and reduce lead times. This initiative involves integrating new data analytics tools and potentially sharing certain operational data with third-party logistics providers. Given the global nature of NXP Semiconductors operations, which of the following approaches to process optimization is most aligned with ensuring strict adherence to regulatory frameworks and ethical conduct? Option A. Prioritize the cost-saving aspects of the new software, making only minimal adjustments to the existing processes to ensure basic functionality, with the understanding that regulatory compliance can be addressed reactively if issues arise. Option B. Implement the new software and data sharing protocols immediately across all regions to achieve rapid efficiency gains, assuming that standard business practices are universally acceptable. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of all relevant regulatory requirements in each jurisdiction where NXP Semiconductors operates, and then tailor the software implementation and data sharing agreements to meet these specific legal and ethical obligations before proceeding with any changes. Option D. Focus the optimization solely on the technical capabilities of the new software, assuming that the legal and compliance departments will handle any regulatory concerns after the system is fully deployed. The correct answer is B. Implement the new software and data sharing protocols immediately across all regions to achieve rapid efficiency gains, assuming that standard business practices are universally acceptable. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because NXP Semiconductors, as a global entity, operates under diverse regulatory landscapes. Process optimization efforts, while aimed at efficiency, must rigorously adhere to the specific legal and ethical frameworks governing its operations in each jurisdiction. A failure to do so can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. The core challenge lies in balancing the pursuit of efficiency with the absolute necessity of compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough review and adaptation of existing processes to align with the specific regulatory requirements of the relevant jurisdiction, ensuring that any optimization does not inadvertently create non-compliance. This is crucial because regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data privacy, e.g., GDPR in relevant territories, environmental standards, or labor laws, are not uniform and carry specific mandates. Adhering to these mandates is not merely a legal obligation but an ethical imperative to operate responsibly and maintain stakeholder trust. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over regulatory due diligence fails to recognize the paramount importance of compliance. This could lead to violations of data protection laws. For instance, by improperly handling sensitive employee or customer information during process changes, resulting in substantial fines and legal action. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on regulatory adherence might overlook essential safety protocols or environmental safeguards, exposing NXP Semiconductors to significant risks and potential harm. A third incorrect approach that assumes a one-size-fits-all optimization strategy across all NXP Semiconductors' global operations ignores the fundamental principle that regulations are jurisdiction-specific. This can lead to non-compliance in regions with stricter or different requirements, undermining the entire optimization effort and creating legal liabilities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the specific jurisdiction impacted by the process optimization. This is followed by a comprehensive assessment of all applicable regulations within those jurisdictions. Any proposed optimization must then be vetted against these regulations, with a clear understanding of potential compliance risks. If risks are identified, the optimization plan must be revised to mitigate them, or the optimization should be reconsidered if mitigation is not feasible without compromising compliance. This systematic, compliance-first approach ensures that efficiency gains are achieved ethically and legally. Question 11. Process analysis reveals potential opportunities to streamline NXP Semiconductors' product development lifecycle by integrating external cloud-based collaboration tools. Which of the following approaches best balances efficiency gains with regulatory compliance and ethical considerations? Option A. Implement a pilot program with a limited set of tools, focusing solely on user adoption and perceived productivity improvements, deferring detailed regulatory and security audits until after the pilot phase. Option B. Immediately adopt the most feature-rich and cost-effective cloud collaboration tools to accelerate development timelines, assuming standard data protection clauses are sufficient. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of NXP Semiconductors' internal data governance policies, relevant international data privacy regulations, e.g., GDPR, CCPA, and intellectual property protection guidelines to identify any potential conflicts or requirements before selecting and integrating any new tools. Option D. Prioritize tools that offer the fastest integration and broadest access for all stakeholders, with a plan to address any compliance issues retrospectively as they arise. The correct answer is B. Immediately adopt the most feature-rich and cost-effective cloud collaboration tools to accelerate development timelines, assuming standard data protection clauses are sufficient. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because NXP Semiconductors, as a global technology company, operates within a complex web of international regulations and ethical standards. Ensuring compliance while optimizing processes requires a nuanced understanding of how different regulatory frameworks might intersect or conflict, particularly concerning data privacy and intellectual property. Careful judgment is required to balance efficiency gains with the imperative to uphold legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach involves a thorough review of NXP Semiconductors' internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, if processing EU citizen data, or similar data protection laws in other operating regions, and any specific semiconductor industry regulations. This approach prioritizes understanding the legal and ethical boundaries before implementing process changes. It ensures that any optimization efforts do not inadvertently lead to non-compliance, data breaches, or the compromise of intellectual property, which could result in significant fines, reputational damage, and legal action. This aligns with the ethical duty of care and the legal requirement to operate within established regulations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering regulatory implications risks violating data privacy laws. For example, if process optimization involves sharing sensitive customer or employee data with third-party vendors without adequate data processing agreements or consent, it could lead to GDPR violations or similar breaches in other jurisdictions. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thorough risk assessment might overlook potential intellectual property infringements or the unauthorized use of proprietary information, which is critical in the competitive semiconductor industry. This would be a failure of due diligence and could expose NXP Semiconductors to significant legal liabilities and loss of competitive advantage. A third incorrect approach that relies on outdated or incomplete regulatory knowledge could lead to the implementation of processes that are no longer compliant with current laws, creating an immediate risk of noncompliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the current regulatory landscape relevant to NXP Semiconductors operations. This includes identifying all applicable laws, industry standards, and internal policies. Subsequently, any proposed process optimization should be rigorously assessed against these requirements, with a particular focus on data handling, intellectual property protection, and ethical considerations. A risk assessment matrix should be utilized to identify potential compliance gaps and their severity. Finally, implementation should only proceed after all identified risks have been mitigated and appropriate legal and compliance approvals have been obtained. Question 12. To address the challenge of optimizing NXP Semiconductors' product lifecycle management processes, which approach would best ensure both operational efficiency and adherence to global regulatory standards, particularly concerning data privacy and intellectual property protection? Option A. Focus on reducing the number of data validation steps in the product design phase to accelerate time to market, assuming that existing internal quality control measures are sufficient and that external regulatory data integrity requirements are implicitly met. Option B. Expedite the adoption of third-party components and technologies in new product development to reduce internal research and development time, without conducting detailed checks on the intellectual property status or licensing agreements of these external elements. Option C. Conduct a thorough audit of current product lifecycle management workflows, identify areas of inefficiency, and then develop proposed optimizations that are explicitly reviewed and approved by NXP's legal, compliance, and data privacy teams to ensure alignment with all applicable regulations and ethical guidelines. Option D. Implement a new, integrated software system that centralizes all product data, prioritizing speed of data access and sharing across departments, without initial comprehensive review of data handling protocols against specific regional privacy laws. The correct answer is D. Implement a new, integrated software system that centralizes all product data, prioritizing speed of data access and sharing across departments without initial comprehensive review of data handling protocols against specific regional privacy laws. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because NXP Semiconductors, as a global technology company, operates within a complex web of regulations and ethical considerations. Optimizing processes, especially those involving product development and supply chain management, requires a delicate balance between efficiency, compliance, and stakeholder interests. The challenge lies in identifying process improvements that not only enhance operational performance, but also uphold the company's commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory adherence, particularly concerning data privacy and intellectual property. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed optimization does not inadvertently lead to non-compliance or ethical breaches. The correct approach involves a thorough review of existing processes, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies, and then proposing solutions that are rigorously vetted against relevant regulatory frameworks and ethical guidelines. This includes consulting with legal and compliance departments to ensure proposed changes do not violate data protection laws, e.g., GDPR if applicable to NXP's operations in relevant regions, or intellectual property rights. The justification for this approach is rooted in the principle of responsible innovation and corporate citizenship. By prioritizing compliance and ethical considerations from the outset, NXP can mitigate risks, build trust with stakeholders, and ensure sustainable growth. This proactive stance aligns with the expectations of regulatory bodies and the broader business community for transparency and accountability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering regulatory implications would be professionally unacceptable. For instance, streamlining data handling procedures in a way that bypasses necessary anonymization or consent mechanisms would violate data privacy regulations, leading to significant legal penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to accelerate product development by adopting unverified or proprietary technologies without proper due diligence regarding intellectual property ownership. This could result in infringement claims, costly litigation, and disruption to product launches. A third incorrect approach might involve implementing new software or systems that collect excessive personal data without clear justification or user consent, thereby contravening privacy principles and potentially violating data protection laws. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a multi-stakeholder consultation. For implementing any process optimization, professionals should engage with relevant departments such as legal, compliance, IT security, and data privacy officers. A risk assessment should be conducted to identify potential regulatory, ethical, and operational risks associated with the proposed changes. Furthermore, a thorough understanding of the specific regulatory landscape applicable to NXP's operations in its key markets is paramount. This ensures that proposed optimizations are not only efficient, but also legally sound and ethically defensible, fostering a culture of compliance and responsible business practices. Question 13. The review process indicates that NXP Semiconductors' current candidate onboarding process is experiencing significant delays, impacting time-to-hire metrics. To address this, a proposal has been made to implement a new, fully automated system for background checks and reference verification, bypassing the need for direct human oversight in the initial stages of these checks. What is the most appropriate approach to optimizing this process while ensuring compliance with relevant employment laws and ethical standards? Option A. Focus on reducing the number of required background checks and reference checks to speed up the process, assuming that fewer checks will inherently lead to faster onboarding. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the current background check and reference verification procedures to identify specific bottlenecks, and then design automated solutions that incorporate necessary human review points and ensure compliance with all relevant employment laws and NXP Semiconductors ethical guidelines. Option C. Prioritize speed by relying on the discretion of the hiring managers to waive certain background check or reference verification steps if they feel the candidate is a strong fit, thereby reducing the overall number of checks performed. Option D. Implement the fully automated system for background checks and reference verification immediately to expedite the onboarding process and reduce delays. The correct answer is D. Implement the fully automated system for background checks and reference verification immediately to expedite the onboarding process and reduce delays. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficiency in NXP Semiconductors' hiring process with the imperative to adhere to all relevant employment laws and ethical considerations. The pressure to streamline can lead to shortcuts that inadvertently create legal risks or unfair outcomes for candidates. Careful judgment is required to ensure that process optimization does not compromise compliance or fairness. The correct approach involves systematically identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies within the existing hiring process, and then proposing targeted improvements that are demonstrably compliant with all applicable employment regulations and NXP Semiconductors' internal ethical guidelines. This approach prioritizes a thorough understanding of the current state, data-driven analysis of where improvements are needed, and the development of solutions that are both effective and legally sound. This ensures that NXP Semiconductors maintains its commitment to fair hiring practices and avoids potential legal repercussions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed without considering regulatory implications could lead to discriminatory practices, even if unintentional. For example, implementing automated screening tools without proper validation might inadvertently filter out qualified candidates from protected groups, violating anti-discrimination laws. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established candidate communication protocols to expedite decisions could result in a perception of unfairness and potentially violate guidelines related to candidate experience and transparency. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal biases to identify areas for improvement, rather than objective data and regulatory analysis, risks creating a process that is not only inefficient but also legally vulnerable and ethically questionable. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the regulatory landscape governing hiring. This includes familiarizing themselves with relevant employment laws and NXP Semiconductors' specific policies. Next, they should gather objective data on the current hiring process to identify actual inefficiencies, rather than perceived ones. Proposed solutions should then be rigorously evaluated against both efficiency goals and regulatory compliance requirements. Finally, a continuous feedback loop and periodic review process should be established to ensure that optimized processes remain compliant and effective over time. Question 14. What factors determine the most effective and compliant approach to process optimization within NXP Semiconductors, considering global operational standards and ethical responsibilities? Option A. Adopting industry best practices without verifying their applicability to NXP's specific regulatory environment. Option B. Focusing solely on increasing production output without regard for workforce impact. Option C. A comprehensive evaluation of regulatory frameworks, ethical implications, and potential impact on intellectual property and data privacy. Option D. Prioritizing rapid implementation of new technologies to achieve immediate cost savings. Correct answer is C. A comprehensive evaluation of regulatory frameworks, ethical implications, and potential impact on intellectual property and data privacy. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because NXP Semiconductors, as a global technology company, operates within a complex web of international regulations and ethical considerations. Optimizing processes requires balancing efficiency gains with strict adherence to compliance standards, particularly concerning data privacy, intellectual property protection, and fair labor practices. A misstep can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that process improvements do not inadvertently create compliance risks or ethical breaches. The correct approach involves a holistic assessment that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical integrity alongside efficiency. This means thoroughly understanding and integrating relevant regulations, such as those pertaining to data protection, e.g., GDPR if applicable to NXP's operations in relevant jurisdictions, and industry-specific standards into the process design. Ethical considerations, such as ensuring fair treatment of employees and responsible sourcing of materials, must also be foundational. This approach ensures that NXP Semiconductors not only achieves operational excellence, but also maintains its commitment to responsible corporate citizenship and legal standing. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to violations of data privacy laws, resulting in substantial fines and loss of customer trust. For instance, Implementing a process that bypasses necessary data anonymization steps to speed up analysis would violate data protection regulations. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thorough risk assessment is also professionally flawed. This might involve deploying new software or workflows without adequately vetting them for security vulnerabilities or compliance with intellectual property laws, potentially exposing NXP to data breaches or patent infringement claims. A third incorrect approach that neglects the ethical impact on employees, such as automating roles without providing adequate retraining or support, is ethically unsound and can lead to employee dissatisfaction, reduced morale, and potential labor disputes, which can indirectly impact productivity and compliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all applicable regulatory and ethical frameworks. This should be followed by a comprehensive risk assessment for each proposed process optimization, evaluating potential impacts on compliance, data security, intellectual property, and stakeholder well-being. Solutions should then be designed to mitigate these risks proactively, ensuring that efficiency gains are achieved within a robust compliance and ethical structure. Continuous monitoring and review are also crucial to adapt to evolving regulations and best practices. Question 15. The evaluation methodology shows that NXP Semiconductors is considering a new automated system for candidate feedback generation to streamline post-assessment communication. This system aims to improve efficiency by using predefined templates and AI-driven insights. However, the implementation of this system must strictly adhere to the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines specified for the NXP Semiconductors hiring assessment test. Which of the following approaches best ensures that this process optimization aligns with the assessment's jurisdictional requirements? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed automated feedback system against the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines of the NXP Semiconductors hiring assessment test to identify and mitigate any potential compliance risks before implementation. Option B. Prioritize the speed of feedback delivery by launching the automated system and addressing any potential regulatory concerns that may arise after its initial deployment. Option C. Implement the automated feedback system immediately, assuming that AI-driven insights and predefined templates inherently comply with all assessment regulations. Option D. Rely on general industry standards for automated feedback systems, as these are widely accepted and likely to meet the assessment's requirements without explicit verification. Correct answer is C. Implement the automated feedback system immediately, assuming that AI-driven insights and predefined templates inherently comply with all assessment regulations. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because NXP Semiconductors, as a global entity, operates under diverse regulatory landscapes. The core challenge lies in ensuring that process optimization initiatives, while aiming for efficiency and innovation, do not inadvertently lead to noncompliance with the specific hiring assessment test's regulatory framework. This requires a nuanced understanding of how process changes might impact data handling, candidate privacy, and fairness in assessment, all within the confines of the stipulated exam jurisdiction. Careful judgment is required to balance the benefits of optimization with the imperative of adhering to the assessment's governing rules. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the proposed process optimization against the specific requirements of the NXP Semiconductors hiring assessment test's regulatory framework. This means identifying any potential conflicts or areas where the optimization might inadvertently compromise the integrity, fairness, or compliance of the assessment process as defined by the exam's guidelines. This approach is correct because it prioritizes adherence to the established regulatory framework, which is paramount in any assessment context, especially one designed to evaluate candidates for a company like NXP Semiconductors. It ensures that the pursuit of efficiency does not undermine the validity and legality of the hiring assessment. An incorrect approach would be to implement process optimizations based solely on general industry best practices for efficiency without a specific review against the NXP Semiconductors hiring assessment test's regulatory framework. This is ethically and regulatorily flawed because it assumes that general efficiency gains will automatically align with the specific, potentially unique, compliance requirements of the assessment. It risks overlooking critical provisions related to candidate data privacy, non-discrimination, or the integrity of the assessment itself, as dictated by the exam's jurisdiction. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize the speed of implementation of process optimizations over a comprehensive compliance check. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It suggests a disregard for the potential consequences of noncompliance, which could range from invalidating assessment results to legal repercussions, depending on the specific jurisdiction governing the NXP Semiconductors hiring assessment test. The integrity of the assessment process and the protection of candidate rights must not be sacrificed for expediency. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. First, clearly define the scope and objectives of the process optimization. Second, meticulously identify all relevant regulatory and ethical guidelines pertaining to the NXP Semiconductors hiring assessment test. Third, conduct a gap analysis to pinpoint any discrepancies between the proposed optimization and the regulatory requirements. Fourth, consult with legal and compliance experts if necessary. Finally, implement optimizations only after ensuring they are fully compliant and have been reviewed for potential adverse impacts on the assessment's fairness and integrity. Question 16. Quality control measures reveal a recurring minor defect in a specific batch of microcontrollers produced by NXP Semiconductors. To address this, a proposal suggests streamlining the testing phase by reducing the number of verification steps, citing potential cost savings and faster throughput. Which of the following approaches best balances process optimization with regulatory compliance and ethical manufacturing standards for NXP Semiconductors? Option A. Implement the proposed streamlined testing phase immediately to reduce costs and accelerate delivery, with a plan to address any escalated issues in subsequent production runs. Option B. Conduct a root cause analysis of the recurring defect. Review the current testing protocols against relevant semiconductor industry standards and NXP's internal quality guidelines, and then propose targeted adjustments to the testing phase that maintain or enhance defect detection while improving efficiency. Option C. Focus solely on identifying the cheapest alternative components to mitigate the defect, without altering the existing testing procedures. Option D. Rely on anecdotal feedback from the production floor to make ad hoc adjustments to the testing process, prioritizing speed over thoroughness. The correct answer is A. Implement the proposed streamlined testing phase immediately to reduce costs and accelerate delivery, with a plan to address any escalated issues in subsequent production runs. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because NXP Semiconductors, as a global technology company, operates within a complex web of international regulations and ethical standards. The pressure to optimize processes, particularly in quality control, must be balanced against the imperative to adhere to these frameworks. Misinterpreting or circumventing regulatory requirements can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and a loss of trust from customers and stakeholders. Careful judgment is required to ensure that process improvements do not inadvertently compromise compliance or ethical conduct. The correct approach involves a thorough review of existing quality control procedures against the relevant regulatory framework for NXP Semiconductors operations, likely encompassing standards like ISO 9001 and specific semiconductor industry guidelines. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes compliance and risk mitigation. By systematically identifying deviations and implementing corrective actions that align with established regulations and best practices, NXP can achieve process optimization without compromising product integrity or legal standing. This proactive and compliant method ensures that improvements are sustainable and defensible. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering regulatory impact is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for legal obligations and industry standards, potentially leading to non-compliant products, recalls, and severe financial and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established quality gates to accelerate production, even with the intention of addressing issues later, is also ethically and regulatorily flawed. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to product quality and safety, violating principles of responsible manufacturing and potentially exposing NXP to liability if defects arise. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or informal feedback for process changes, rather than data-driven analysis and regulatory alignment, risks implementing ineffective or even detrimental changes that could lead to quality degradation and noncompliance. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to NXP Semiconductors. This involves consulting internal compliance departments, legal counsel, and relevant industry standards. The next step is to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment for any proposed process changes, evaluating potential impacts on quality, safety, and compliance. Solutions should then be developed that demonstrably meet both optimization goals and regulatory requirements. Finally, all changes should be documented, validated, and monitored to ensure ongoing adherence to standards. Question 17. Operational review demonstrates that NXP Semiconductors' product lifecycle management process could be streamlined to reduce time to market and associated costs. However, this review has also highlighted potential areas where data handling and product compliance checks might be accelerated. Considering the paramount importance of regulatory adherence, which of the following approaches to process optimization would be most professionally responsible and compliant for NXP Semiconductors? Option A. Focus on optimizing data storage and archival processes to minimize immediate costs, without a detailed review of specific data retention periods mandated by various jurisdictions. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive regulatory impact assessment for each proposed process change, ensuring that any acceleration of data handling or product compliance steps aligns with all applicable laws and ethical guidelines before implementation. Option C. Implement changes that significantly reduce the time spent on data validation and regulatory sign-off for new product features, prioritizing speed and cost savings. Option D. Accelerate the development cycle by relying on self-certification for product compliance, assuming that internal quality checks are sufficient without external regulatory verification. The correct answer is C. Implement changes that significantly reduce the time spent on data validation and regulatory sign-off for new product features, prioritizing speed and cost savings. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for NXP Semiconductors' compliance team by requiring them to balance the pursuit of operational efficiency with strict adherence to regulatory frameworks governing data handling and product lifecycle management. The challenge lies in identifying process improvements that do not inadvertently create compliance risks or violate established legal and ethical standards. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed changes are not only beneficial from a business perspective, but also legally sound and ethically responsible, particularly concerning data privacy and product safety. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of existing processes against relevant regulations, such as those pertaining to the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. If NXP operates within or processes data of EU citizens, or similar data protection laws in other applicable jurisdictions, this approach prioritizes understanding the regulatory landscape and integrating compliance checks directly into the process optimization framework. By systematically evaluating each proposed change for its regulatory impact, NXP can ensure that efficiency gains do not compromise data privacy, security, or product conformity. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining trust with customers, regulators, and stakeholders, and for avoiding significant legal penalties and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering regulatory implications could lead to violations of data protection laws. For instance, streamlining data retention policies without ensuring compliance with legal requirements for data minimization and storage limitation would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of product development by bypassing necessary quality assurance and regulatory validation steps would risk releasing non-compliant products, leading to potential recalls, fines, and harm to consumers, which is a clear breach of product safety regulations and ethical responsibilities. A third incorrect approach that involves outsourcing critical data processing activities without conducting due diligence on the vendor's compliance posture would expose NXP to risks associated with third-party data breaches and non-compliance, violating the principle of accountability under data protection laws. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the applicable regulatory environment. This involves identifying all relevant laws, directives, and industry standards. Subsequently, proposed process changes should be subjected to a risk assessment that explicitly considers compliance implications. This assessment should involve cross-functional teams, including legal and compliance experts, to ensure all potential risks are identified and mitigated. The decision-making process should then prioritize solutions that achieve operational objectives while demonstrably meeting or exceeding regulatory requirements, fostering a culture of compliance from the outset of any optimization initiative. Question 18. Benchmark analysis indicates that a new automated data logging system could significantly reduce manual data entry errors in NXP Semiconductors fabrication process. However, the proposed systems integration plan bypasses several of the company's standard data validation and security protocols to expedite deployment. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible approach for NXP Semiconductors process optimization team? Option A. Implement the new data logging system only after a comprehensive review and validation process that ensures full compliance with NXP Semiconductors data security, integrity, and intellectual property protection policies, even if it delays deployment. Option B. Request the vendor to develop a custom version of their system that strictly adheres to NXP Semiconductors' existing validation and security protocols, accepting potential cost increases and extended timelines. Option C. Proceed with the expedited deployment of the new system, assuming the vendor's assurances of data integrity are sufficient to realize the immediate error reduction benefits. Option D. Modify NXP Semiconductors' existing data validation and security protocols to match the new system's capabilities, prioritizing the speed of integration over the established internal standards. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the expedited deployment of the new system, assuming the vendor's assurances of data integrity are sufficient to realize the immediate error reduction benefits. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for NXP Semiconductors employees involved in process optimization due to the inherent tension between achieving efficiency gains and maintaining compliance with regulatory frameworks. The need to balance speed and cost-effectiveness with the stringent requirements of semiconductor manufacturing, particularly concerning data integrity, product quality, and intellectual property protection, demands careful judgment. The correct approach involves a systematic review and validation of proposed process changes against established NXP Semiconductors' internal policies and relevant industry standards, ensuring that any optimization does not compromise data security or regulatory adherence. This aligns with the ethical obligation to uphold the integrity of NXP's operations and products, and the regulatory imperative to maintain accurate records and prevent unauthorized access or disclosure of sensitive information. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thorough validation risks introducing vulnerabilities. For instance, bypassing standard data validation protocols could lead to the use of inaccurate or corrupted data in subsequent manufacturing stages, potentially resulting in product defects and regulatory noncompliance. Similarly, implementing changes without a comprehensive risk assessment for intellectual property could expose proprietary designs or manufacturing techniques to unauthorized access or leakage, violating NXP's duty to protect its assets and potentially contravening intellectual property laws. Another incorrect approach might involve adopting a new process based solely on external vendor claims without independent verification. This fails to meet the professional responsibility to ensure that all adopted technologies and processes are robust, secure, and compliant with NXP's specific operational and regulatory environment, potentially leading to unforeseen security breaches or performance issues. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the proposed optimization's objectives and potential impacts. This should be followed by a thorough review of NXP Semiconductors' internal guidelines, relevant industry best practices, and any applicable regulatory requirements. A risk assessment should then be conducted to identify potential compliance, security, and quality issues. Finally, decisions should be made based on a comprehensive evaluation of these factors, prioritizing adherence to established protocols and ethical standards over expediency. Question 19. Quality control measures reveal that the current candidate assessment process at NXP Semiconductors for its UK-based hiring assessment test is experiencing significant delays, impacting the timely onboarding of new talent. Which of the following process optimization strategies would best align with UK employment law and SISI ethical guidelines while addressing these delays? Option A. Accelerating the feedback loop to candidates by providing only a pass/fail notification for each assessment stage, eliminating detailed qualitative feedback to save time. Option B. Streamlining the interview scheduling process by introducing a self-service portal for candidates and reducing the number of interview stages based on a statistical analysis of their impact on hiring outcomes. Option C. Outsourcing the initial screening of applications to a third-party vendor without a comprehensive review of their data handling practices or compliance with UK anti-discrimination laws. Option D. Implementing a new AI-driven screening tool that prioritizes candidates based on predictive performance metrics, with a focus on reducing the time to hire by 30%. The correct answer is D. Implementing a new AI-driven screening tool that prioritizes candidates based on predictive performance metrics, with a focus on reducing the time to hire by 30%. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because NXP Semiconductors, as a global entity, must navigate varying regulatory landscapes while maintaining consistent quality and ethical standards in its hiring processes. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing process optimizations that not only enhance efficiency, but also strictly adhere to the specific employment laws and ethical guidelines applicable to the hiring assessment test jurisdiction, which for this exam is assumed to be the United Kingdom, guided by SISI principles. A failure to do so could lead to legal repercussions, reputational damage, and a compromised candidate pool. The correct approach involves a thorough review of existing hiring assessment procedures to identify bottlenecks or inefficiencies, followed by the implementation of targeted improvements that are demonstrably compliant with UK employment law and SISI ethical standards. This means any proposed changes must not introduce bias, ensure fairness, and maintain data privacy, as mandated by regulations like the Equality Act 2010 and GDPR. The SISI Code of Conduct, emphasizing integrity, competence, and due care, further underpins the need for a robust and ethical assessment process. Optimization should focus on enhancing the candidate experience and the predictive validity of the assessment without compromising these fundamental principles. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed or cost reduction without considering regulatory compliance would be professionally unacceptable. For instance, automating candidate screening in a way that inadvertently discriminates against protected characteristics, violating the Equality Act 2010, is a significant ethical and legal failure. Similarly, implementing a new assessment tool without adequate validation or without ensuring data protection measures align with GDPR would be a breach of professional duty and regulatory requirements. Another incorrect approach might involve bypassing established quality control checks in the name of speed, which undermines the integrity of the assessment and could lead to the selection of unsuitable candidates, failing the SISI requirement for competence and due care. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the specific regulatory framework governing hiring in the relevant jurisdiction. They should then conduct a comprehensive audit of current processes, identifying areas for improvement. Any proposed optimization must be evaluated against legal requirements and ethical principles, with a focus on maintaining fairness, transparency, and data security. Seeking legal counsel or HR expertise when in doubt is a crucial part of the professional decision-making process to ensure full compliance and uphold ethical standards. Question 20. Strategic planning requires NXP Semiconductors to optimize its manufacturing processes for increased efficiency. Considering the company's commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical operations, which of the following approaches best aligns with these principles for achieving process optimization? Option A. Adopting process improvements observed at competitor facilities without a formal internal validation or legal review to ensure compatibility with NXP's specific regulatory obligations. Option B. Prioritizing cost reduction by streamlining quality control and validation steps to accelerate production timelines, even if it means deviating from established internal guidelines. Option C. Implementing a comprehensive review and documented update of Internal Standard Operating Procedures, SOP, for process optimization, ensuring all changes are vetted against NXP's existing compliance policies and relevant industry regulations. Option D. Rapidly deploying new automation technologies based on vendor recommendations, without a thorough internal assessment of their impact on data handling and existing compliance protocols. The correct answer is C. Implementing a comprehensive review and documented update of internal standard operating procedures, SOP, for process optimization, ensuring all changes are vetted against NXP's existing compliance policies and relevant industry regulations. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for NXP Semiconductors by requiring a strategic decision on process optimization that balances efficiency gains with adherence to regulatory frameworks. The challenge lies in identifying an approach that not only improves operational performance, but also ensures compliance with relevant laws and ethical standards, particularly concerning data handling and intellectual property within the semiconductor industry. Careful judgment is required to avoid shortcuts that could lead to legal repercussions or reputational damage. The correct approach involves a thorough review and documented update of internal standard operating procedures, SOP, for process optimization, ensuring all changes are vetted against NXP's existing compliance policies and relevant industry regulations. This method is best professional practice because it systematically addresses potential risks. By documenting changes and ensuring they align with established compliance frameworks, NXP safeguards itself against regulatory violations and maintains the integrity of its operations. This proactive and documented approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible business conduct and regulatory adherence, which is paramount in the highly regulated semiconductor sector. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid implementation of new technologies without a comprehensive compliance review poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. This could lead to inadvertent breaches of data privacy laws if sensitive information is mishandled during the optimization process, or violations of intellectual property rights if third-party technologies are integrated without proper licensing. Another incorrect approach, which prioritizes cost reduction by bypassing established quality control and validation steps, risks producing non-compliant products or compromising the security and reliability of NXP semiconductor solutions. This not only invites regulatory scrutiny, but also erodes customer trust and could lead to product recalls or legal liabilities. A third incorrect approach, which involves informal adoption of best practices from competitors without rigorous internal assessment, could inadvertently introduce non-compliant processes or expose proprietary information, leading to legal challenges and competitive disadvantages. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the strategic objective of process optimization. This should be followed by a comprehensive risk assessment, identifying potential regulatory, ethical, and operational pitfalls. Solutions should then be evaluated not only for their efficiency benefits, but also for their compliance implications. Engaging legal and compliance teams early in the process is crucial. Finally, any adopted optimization strategy must be thoroughly documented, implemented with robust oversight, and continuously monitored for ongoing compliance and effectiveness.